going on, guys? Welcome back to Nacho Wrestling. And in today's video, we are taking a look at something that I believe has become a bit of a problem in professional wrestling over the past few years. No, it's not the incessant and annoying product placement and ads. It is title reigns that last too long. Whether this be a 400 plus day reign as champion or a reign as champion that's under 365 days, we are taking a look at all of them and why some long title reigns work and some don't. But before we do all that, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling, and if this is your first time watching a Nacho Wrestling video, why don't you hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. Throughout wrestling's vast history, there has always been long-reigning champions and prestigious champions, so to speak. None more so than Bruno Sammartino back in the 40s and 50s. He still to this day has the longest reign as champion, lasting over 7 years total. There's always this idea that longer reigns create more prestige. Fast forward from the Bruno Sammartino years to the rock and wrestling era with Hulk Hogan and his cohorts, it was still the norm for guys to hold the titles for long periods of time. Granted, it wasn't as long as Bruno, or later on long as Roman, but it was still relatively long, especially if your name was Hulk Hogan. I want to say that obviously, while I did say at the top of the video that long reigns have become a problem in more recent years, they've always been a thing. It's not like they just randomly popped up in the past few years as an ideology. The reason that guys during the New Generation era and Rocking Wrestling era held titles for so long was because that there was this idea that there was legitimacy in the title if it was held by less amount of guys and for longer periods of time. There is also a lot of legitimacy in the idea that when a champion lost the belt, they only lost it because if they were a face, they had nothing left in the tank, or if they were a heel, they got teamed up on by a bunch of other faces. Nowadays, especially in the streaming era of professional wrestling, it's very obvious that consistency has become key, which is why we're seeing a lot more of these longer title reigns. This is of course because there is a lot more casual viewers who don't watch every single week like us hardcore fans. This idea of consistency is key came about for two reasons. The major one was, during the 90s and early 2000s, there was a lot of hot potatoing of the title. You'd have someone like Mick Foley win the belt on a random episode of Monday Night Raw, or you'd have Kane win it at a pay-per-view and then lose it immediately the next Monday. Or later on in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you had a lot of experimental things going on, especially in WWE since they were the only game in town. You had them putting titles on new guys like Jack Swagger and Sheamus, and then you had them using indie darlings as a way to get more eyes on their product like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. Nowadays, these long reigns are used to establish a wrestler to a specific brand. Roman Reigns to SmackDown, Gunther to WWE in general, or my biggest example that I have, MJF to AEW with his first world title run with the Triple B back in 2021. While yes, the ending of that title reign was, as MJF would describe it, mid, it was still an overall good championship reign, and it allowed everybody to see MJF as one of the preeminent faces of AEW. I mentioned CM Punk earlier, and CM Punk had reigns with the World Heavyweight title, but his longest reign to date in WWE is of course his 434-day reign with the spinner belt from 2011 to 2012. While the hot potato era has been corrected and is still being corrected to this day, every correction has an overcorrection. I mentioned briefly at the top of the video that longer reigns were helped to be prestigious. And while this is true, prestigiousness does not come about just from one guy beating the entire roster. Look at Mox's first world title win of his 4 in AEW back in 2021. When him and Kenny met for the first time at Winter is Coming, the prestige was not baked in only from the championship itself, seeing as Mox was only the second world champion at this time, but the prestige came because Kenny Omega was willing to do anything and everything, even sacrificing all his morals to win the championship belt. Or back in WWE, I've already mentioned CM Punk's 400 plus day reign as champion, which should have and could have ended at Raw 1000 with John Cena's inaugural announcing of the cash-in, but didn't due to Rock and Big Show shenanigans. It's the uncertainty that creates the prestige. It's the idea that you don't know if someone going into the match is going to lose the title. You don't believe that these false finishes are going to be the real finish. And that's truly when the tension dies, is when fans stop believing that a wrestler is going to lose the belt. Let me stress this point real quick. Predictability is not inherently boring. Predictability becomes boring when there's no emotional depth to the story. That is why some of the matches during Kenny's belt collector run were so fun and so interesting, because not only did we know that one day it was going to be him versus Hangman for the belt, but we had to sit back, wait, and watch, and the uncertainty of Kenny Omega possibly losing that belt to somebody else, or just more or less collecting more belts. But the reason that story worked, and the reason that that story added prestige to the world title, was because there was uncertainty in how we were going to get to that finish, and there was emotional depth in overall with that story. But all of this can feel unimportant, whether it's a title reign of 6 months or a title reign of over a year. More often than not, predictability becomes an issue not because of uncertainty, but because of a wrestler outgrowing the championship they have. Well, I think we all know what I mean when I say that a champion has outgrown the championship. Of course, I'm referring to Roman Reigns. The Tribal Chief Roman Reigns was Universal Champion for over 2 years and Undisputed Champion for over a year. And at a certain point, it became an issue of him holding the belt, not because it was boring, not because it wasn't cinema, but because he had reached Undertaker levels, John Cena levels, Triple H levels of status. He did not need to have the world title for his matches to be the main event anymore. Yet, he was still champion. Another example that I would give that doesn't have anything to do with Roman Reigns would ironically be Jon Moxley's most recent world title run, which I know a lot of people are going to go flock to the comments and say that that title reign was bad, that title reign hindered AEW more than helped it. And to that, I disagree. Mox has been the ace of AEW, honestly, since his debut. Having him be the one to dethrone Danielson as champion, while yes, bias aside, pissed me off, and Danielson very well easily could have dropped the belt to a young up-and-comer or somebody else on the roster that wasn't an already 3-time champion. I mean, if we're being honest, I would have loved it if he dropped the title to Jack Perry instead. I'm kidding. But I'm really not kidding, because that kind of circles back to my idea of uncertainty. And that's why Danielson's short run with the belt really worked. Because when he said, after I lose this, I'm done, every match became important. His match with Jack Perry, his matches on Dynamite, everything like that. No one thought that Mox was going to be the one to beat him, especially turn heel on him after the match. Back to Roman though, and probably the person that got bitched out the most from Roman's reign as Universal and Undisputed Champion was of course Drew McIntyre. Poor Drew was forced to eat a loss in his home country, so far the only show they've done in Scotland recently. Protecting the reign like this is going to immediately cost credibility for other main eventers who should one day hold that championship belt. That's why Drew's reign now with the Undisputed title feels so much like a here damned sort of situation. A title reign should obviously elevate a wrestler, but it should also elevate challengers as well, up to the main event scene. And this overprotection of reigns, plus cycling through the same challengers over and over again, creates a bottleneck situation. Speaking of bottlenecking the roster, the biggest people to take a hit here are of course the mid-carders, specifically the upper mid-carders. Let's stick with our flag bearer of long title reigns, Roman Reigns. The biggest issue for Roman, and of course this was during his time as Undisputed Champion for over a year, and of course before the Big Gold Belt V2 was introduced, was that so many upper mid-carders were forced to just spin their wheels and wait for their turn to get fed to Roman. Especially on the build-up back to Cody versus Roman at WrestleMania 40. That becomes a whole other situation and a question of should Roman have really won at WrestleMania 39 or should he have lost? So many of these have patient moments for mid-carders felt more like momentum killers. None more so than Sami Zayn at Elimination Chamber in 2024. Sami, like Drew, was getting a match against Roman in his home country, surrounded by friends and family, and he got royally bitched out. Yeah, he got a couple moves in, and yeah, the match was competitive towards the tail end, but everyone knew that Roman was gonna win. But they should have added a sense of believability to Sami being the one to beat him. After all, they called back the Shield with Sami hitting him with the chair. Everything was set up. There was emotional depth there in that story. And it would have been capitalized on even more if Sami had won the belt. It would have also added back to my uncertainty point that adds to prestige with having Sami be the one to beat Roman a couple months before Cody could actually get his hands on him. Not saying I'm the greatest booker in the world, I'm just saying that sometimes throwing a curveball is usually what works. Championship reigns, especially extended ones, should not be about entitlement, no pun intended. It should be about overall ecosystem health. Not only elevating the champion to a higher level, but elevating the mid-carders up to that main event scene. But why do long reigns feel as boring and easily burnt out as they do? Well, for one, there's so much wrestling to watch these days. You have Monday Night Raw, Tuesday Night NXT, Wednesday Night Dynamite, Thursday is TNA, I think, and then Friday is SmackDown. There's literally wrestling every day of the week. Oh, Saturday with Collision as well, I almost forgot. There's also so many wrestlers that deserve a run with the belt, it's almost like they should cycle back and come back to the hot potato era. Which you could make the argument that Tony Khan is doing a little bit with having Hangman hold the belt for a few months, drop it to Joe, and then Joe drop it to MJF like 2 months later. And on surface level, it can seem like both times TK just really didn't want to have Hangman have a long run with the belt, especially with how he got bitched out by CM Punk at Double or Nothing. But I feel like that can also just be part of Hangman's overarching story. Hangman Adam Page and his short title reigns work well for me because he's the preeminent good guy in AEW. Not only that, but almost every time, or at least the 2 times, that Hangman has had the world title, he is the most sought after guy all of a sudden. Almost like everyone knows that they can take the belt from him. I mean, case in point, look at how he got beat for the title the second time. Samoa Joe and the Ops quite literally battered him, and he got turned on by fucking Hook. I mean, come on. But back to the long title reigns that do not work. Not only do fans immediately start counting the days of a championship reign 6 months in, or sometimes even earlier, depending on how prestigious the wrestler is, they are clearly more interested in benchmarks than they are the actual meat and potatoes of the storylines. On top of this, promotions, specifically WWE, tend to lean towards more of a "is it time yet" story beat for long championship reigns. Another use of Roman Reigns here, but when Roman Reigns was on the build-up to WrestleMania 40, and every defense he had before 40, it was a question of, is it time yet? He lost Jey Uso. He's lost this guy. Everyone's leaving Roman Reigns. When is he gonna finally lose the belt? They weren't as focused on how Jey teamed up with the Cody Avengers or how the rest of the world around Roman Reigns was crumbling. They were just more focused on asking the question of, is this it? Is this where the historic reign ends? To me, it felt like they were trying to just remind people that they were having another historic modern era title run that wasn't CM Punk's. I've obviously talked a lot about Roman's title run, and that's not to say because it's bad. In fact, I think most of it, if not all of it, worked pretty well. There were a few glaring mistakes here and there, and the spinning of wheels and everything like that, but I think overall it was a good championship run. Would I have liked if someone else beat Roman for the title instead of 40-year-old Cody Rhodes? Probably, but hindsight being what it is, Cody dropped that championship soon after to John Cena, and then won it back against John Cena again, and then dropped it a few months later to Drew McIntyre. So they're sort of doing a hot potato thing with the Undisputed title, but not as frequent as AEW is doing with their World Championship. Speaking of the AEW World Championship, I think Kenny's belt collector run, which I've talked about a little bit in this video as well, worked as well, because not only was he holding the AEW World title, he held the AAA title, he held the TNA title, and of course, he lost those belts before losing the AEW title. Sort of a similar situation to Roman's world crumbling around him, but instead, Kenny was losing all his hardware. But why did these long title reigns work, whereas longer title reigns for like Mercedes Moné with her TNT title, or if we're being honest, Toni Storm's run with the AEW Women's World Championship during her 4th run, why did those not work? The reason Roman's title reign worked so well was a multi-pronged approach. Not only was he believable as the top guy, as this world beater, as this unbeatable champion, it was also because of the fact that Roman and the story that they were on, especially after WrestleMania 39, was a clear path. albeit, like I said, the wheels spinned a little bit here and there between Mania 39 and Mania 40. There was a clear direct path back to Cody Rhodes. Roman's reign also worked because it elevated the guys around him, not only the bloodline, but the other people that were involved with the story, the Cody Vengers and everyone like that. It elevated them back up or to the main event scene for the first time. I don't think we'd have main event Jey Uso in his world title run if he didn't show how good of a character he could do during the Bloodline arc. And if we're being honest, Sami would probably still be stuck in the mid-card forever feuding with Kevin Owens if he never got involved in the Bloodline story either. The same could be said for Drew McIntyre. Drew could be the consummate challenger for a championship and not the champion now if he wasn't a good hand and a good believable foe for the Bloodline during that time. Meanwhile, over in AEW, Kenny's reign worked well because he changed and evolved with the belt. He won the belt and he was a bad guy. He was Don Callis' henchman, essentially. He was doing Don Callis' dirty work. And then eventually he became more of an airhead and he started having the Good Brothers do his dirty work for him. And then slowly but surely over time, Kenny became more crazed for titles, the AAA title, the TNA title, like I've mentioned. He held belts for so long. He was AAA champion for like 600 days or something like that. But he lost that to Vikingo, then he lost the TNA title to Christian Cage, and then inevitably he lost the belt to Hangman, which, like I said earlier, had emotional depth to it overall. Or look at MJF's run with the AEW title, which made him the longest reigning champion at 406 days. He started it as his normal, detestable douchebag self, and then ended up as the lovable face of the company? I've only seen that one time before, and it's when CM Punk did vice versa. He started off as the anti-hero of WWE, the savior from John Cena, and then ended up being a Paul Heyman guy by the end of it. In the best way possible, long reigns are not good because they're long. They're good because they're long and the longness is called for, if that makes sense. This is why ultimately Roman and Kenny's reign worked. I want to end on this note. I'm not advocating for shorter title reigns at all. I know I mentioned and said earlier that bringing back the hot potato era might be a thing that they should do, but I think the biggest need is for clearer storytelling, better story beats, because more often than not, the reason that people hate long title reigns is because when a face wins the title, they realize that the chase was so much better than the actual run as champion. There also needs to be less fear of change. Just because one guy works so well as champion doesn't mean he should hold that championship forever or lose it for a month and then gain it back and hold it for 6 more months and then lose it for 2 weeks and then gain it back in 2 weeks. Like, that's not what I'm saying either. Looking specifically at you here, Cody Rhodes, now that you've lost to Drew in a 3 stages of hell match, so you lost twice, maybe do something else for a while. It is okay to shake things up and put fresh new guys in the main event scene, especially if they have been given trust with the mid-card titles and did good stuff with the mid-card titles. That's why Sami Zayn is kind of spinning his wheels, waiting for his turn to get the world title. If he ever gets it. Professional wrestlers or superstars don't become superstars until they're given a chance at the top. That's just how it works. Yes, you can have someone be a great mid-carder their entire career, but they don't feel like an established name till they're given a chance to run with the big one. This is all to say that championship reigns should not be measured in days, but what and who the reign creates out of it. Whether that reign is a short 2-month reign, or whether that reign lasts 2.5 years. Well, that is it for today's video. Let me know what you guys thought about it down in the comments below. Do you think long title reigns are a problem in professional wrestling, or do you like it when someone holds the belt for too long? Like I said, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you disagree with in this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling, and I will see you guys next time.